Bonjour, hello, and welcome to this year's AS French Carlam Cymru lesson. In this series, we will be looking at 4 topics: pronunciation, the subjunctive, oral card A, focusing on music, museums and literature, and direct and indirect object pronouns. But today's session will be focusing on le subjonctif, comment ça marche, so the subjunctive in French. So, bonjour, je m'appelle Madame Pritchard et je travaille à e-sgol Gymraeg Brodir. L'objectif aujourd'hui, c'est quand et comment utiliser le subjonctif. So, when and how to use the subjunctive. So, the subjunctive becomes more important at A level. You're aware of it at GCSE, but not expected to use it. Some of you may have already begun using it at GCSE, but it does become a lot more expected at A level. So this year, I would suggest that you study it in order to recognise it in reading and listening tasks, and in order to use it in written and oral tasks. So the subjunctive is something that a lot of students kind of shy away from because its kind of reputation is that it's a tricky mode to use. But I just want to say, t'inquiète pas, don't worry, it's really not as bad as you think. So there are lots of tenses in French that you would have to look at, tenses and modes. So this is kind of an outline of all of them. So this is where we are at here: le subjonctif présent et le subjonctif passé. I'll only spend literally a minute on the past tense of the subjunctive. Primarily today we'll be looking at the present tense of the subjunctive. So in English, the subjunctive mode is a verb form used to refer to a hypothetical scenario or to express a wish, suggestion or command. Now, a lot of people don't even realise that there is a subjunctive mode in English because we kind of do it naturally or sometimes don't do it at all. So, for example, we have here, I suggest you be quiet, rather than I suggest you are quiet. Or I wish I were rich, rather than I wish I was rich. So this is the subjunctive, but kind of you either do it without realising, or you don't do it and we're grammatically incorrect in that. So there's a little picture here, but I think the subjunctive in English isn't what we're focusing on. It's just there to give a little background information. Another question that I've been asked is, what's the difference between a mode and a tense? So basically, a mode tells whether the speaker regards an action as a fact, a command, or a condition, whereas the tense tells whether the subject is involved in a present, past, or future action. If anybody would like to look into it further, I've put a little video link here, and there's another one that comes later on. There are lots of video links on YouTube if you wanted to have another little look. So there are 3 modes. There's the indicative, the imperative, and the subjunctive. So the indicative mode is the mode of fact. So it's a statement presented as a fact, a question, or a question of a fact. So for example, rum is an alcoholic liquor, or is rum an alcoholic liquor? So they are both the indicative modes, talking about a fact. The imperative mode is the mode of command or request. So for example, close the door is a command, or please be here on time, which is a request. And then the subjunctive mode is the mode of doubt, condition, wish, imagination, and so on. It's sort of not being certain about something. So I wish you were here. If I were you, I would take the chance. So that it's sort of doubt, or wish, or imagination, and so on. So, le subjonctif. In French, it is used in dependent clauses to indicate some sort of subjectivity, uncertainty, or unreality in the mind of the speaker. So feelings like doubt and desire require the subjunctive, as well as expressions of necessity, possibility, and judgment. So, par exemple, some examples of the subjunctive. We have, il faut que tu prennes le train ce matin. So the subjunctive there would be prenne. Then this one, je suis contente que vous visitiez Paris. So we have visitier there. And on interdit qu'elle aille à la boîte de nuit. So aille, there would be the subjunctive. I'm going to look into more about it. These are just examples. And then demain, il faut que je fasse la vaisselle et que j'aille au supermarché pour acheter des fraises. J'ai peur qu'il n'y en ait plus. Ce n'est plus la saison. So the a there is the subjunctive as well as fasse and aille. Okay, so English speakers have to face two problems with the subjunctive. When should you use it? Because the rules can appear complicated and full of exceptions. And then how does it work? So it's a whole new conjugation that we need to look at, but it's not, well, the regular verbs aren't as bad as you might think. So question one, quand utiliser le subjonctif? When do we use the subjunctive? So the subjunctive is always preceded by que. You will always see the que and then the subjunctive. And here are some examples of when to use it. There's a picture there, but I'm going to go on to a bit more detail here. So the expression in the main clause must end with the relative pronoun que or qui. If it ends with the preposition de, you need to use the infinitive. So, you know, like aller, jouer, the verb in its purest form. So an example here, il est important que tu fasses tes devoirs. It's important that you do or for you to do your homework. So because we have the que there, we've used the subjunctive of faire here, tu fasses. However, il est important de faire tes devoirs. So you can avoid using the subjunctive by using de instead of que. And then we've just got the infinitive faire. Now, this is a good example showing that it's much simpler to avoid using the subjunctive and just use de and faire. However, at A level, it is a good idea to try to push yourself to use the subjunctive wherever possible, not all of the time, but to show the examiners that you can do it, that you're competent, and it's just showing off a little bit in a positive way. And then two subjects. So the subject of the main clause and the dependent clause must be different. If they're the same, then you would use the infinitive again. So it says here, and note there is no future subjunctive in French. Even for subjective situations that are clearly set in the future, the present subjunctive is used. So this is an example here. Il faut que tu prennes le bus demain. So you have to take the bus tomorrow. So it's a future tense command, but you've used the present tense form of the subjunctive, tu prennes. And I've also shown how you could avoid using the subjunctive by saying, il faut prendre le bus demain. So for example, if there was a verb and you weren't sure how to conjugate it in the subjunctive, then you could avoid it by not putting in the que. But if you do know the subjunctive construction of the verb, then I suggest you use it. Another example, je veux que j'aille à la banque, or je veux aller à la banque. So the que would use the subjunctive because you're using a different clause, but then je veux aller à la banque is just one sentence, one clause. Okay? Right, this is quite a simplified version of when to use the subjunctive. There are much more clearer structure following. So if something is known for sure to be reality, it would be the indicative. If the chance of the action becoming a reality is more than 70%, you would use the indicative. But if the chance of the action becoming a reality is less than 70%, the subjunctive. So it's quite a simplified version of when to use it. So for example, je suis certain qu'il a le talent nécessaire pour réussir. 100%, I'm certain that. 100% chance of becoming reality, the indicative. Il est probable qu'il a le talent nécessaire pour réussir. It's probable, so it's likely. 75% chance. I mean, this is just rough. Indicative. However, il est possible qu'il ait le talent nécessaire pour réussir. It's possible, so about a 50% chance would be the subjunctive. So yes, it is a very simplified way of looking at it, but it just gives you an idea. So there are hundreds of verbs, expressions and conjunctions that call for the subjunctive. So it can be helpful to divide them into themes. So for example, after certain conjunctions with que, for example, bien que, quoique, afin que, pour que, avant que, jusqu'à ce que, à moins que, pourvu que, à condition que. So you can see all of these conjunctions include que, okay? And they would be preceded by the subjunctive. A wish or necessity using these verbs. So we have vouloir, ordonner, exiger, souhaiter, désirer, suggérer, proposer, conseiller, etc. And they are followed by que. So an example here. Il voudrait que tu restes avec lui. Now then, you look at the rest, it looks exactly the same as the present tense, but it is the subjunctive. He would like you to stay with him. So because we have the que here, il voudrait que, then you would use a subjunctive. You could also say, il voudrait rester avec lui. So without the que and the tu, you could just put in rester in the infinitive. But as I said earlier, it's really, really good to show the examiner that you can do it. So obviously voudrait comes from vouloir. Then we have another example here. Je suggère qu'il aille aussitôt que possible. So we've got suggérer there, here, suggérer. I suggest, so I suggest that he leaves as soon as possible, or he leave as soon as possible. The subjunctive there. So this is the subjunctive of aller here. I am going to show you the conjugations later on because it's followed by que. So it's a wish, a will, or a necessity. Another group of verbs is a doubt or a fear. So douter, avoir peur, craindre, plus que. So je doute qu'il aille raison. So I comes from avoir. I doubt that he's right. And then j'ai peur qu'elle soit trop timide would be I'm afraid that she is too shy, or that she might be too shy. Okay, so the soit is the subjunctive, present subjunctive of the verb être in the third person singular. Okay, and the verb j'ai peur que is avoir peur que. Okay, and then we have emotions or opinions, so verbs such as adorer, aimer, préférer, détester, followed by que, because obviously we've used j'adore, j'aime, je préfère, je déteste a lot when we began learning French, but when it's followed by que, it takes the subjunctive. So for example, je préfère qu'il soit moins difficile. I'd rather that he were less difficult. And again, here we've got the subjunctive in English as well, he were. And the préfère, je préfère comes from préférer, of course, and the soit is the subjunctive of être. And then the second example here, j'adore qu'elle ne soit pas orgueilleuse. So I love that she's not proud. And again, the same verb, soit is coming from the subjunctive of être. Okay. Regret or happiness, so verbs such as regretter, être désolé, être content, plus que. So il regrette qu'il ne soit pas là pour la fête. So soit here is the third person plural form of être. So this says they are sorry that they are not there for the party. Okay. And then moi je suis contente qu'elle aille un petit ami is I'm happy that she has a boyfriend. So je suis contente comes from être content, and aille comes from the subjunctive conjugation of avoir in the third person singular. And then we have certain impersonal expressions such as il faut, il vaut, il semble, il est important, followed by que. As we saw earlier, if it's followed by de, or if it's just il faut without the que, then you would use the infinitive. Okay, so for example, il est important de jouer au foot, for example, de manger seulement, okay? And il faut réviser, just in the infinitive. However, if these impersonal expressions are followed by que, then we would use the subjunctive. Il faut que tu sois plus sage. You must be better behaved. So, it is necessary that you are more well behaved. And sage could be wise as well. So sois there is coming from the conjugation of être, the subjunctive conjugation of être, and il vaut mieux qu'on reste ensemble would be, it would be better if we stuck together or if we stay together. So il vaut mieux que, here, so il vaut mieux que, it would be better that on reste ensemble. And again, reste there looks like the normal present tense conjugation of rester. And we'll come on to that later, how they're very, very similar. Then sentence starters with que, for example, qui que, quelque, quoi que, ou que, just que, followed by an expression. So for example, quoi que soit le prix, je viens. Whatever the cost, I'm coming. So again, we got soit from être, and the second example, que je finisse ou pas, je suis heureux. So whether I finish or not, I'm happy. So finisse there comes from the third person singular conjugation of finir. So you can see that's a slightly irregular verb there. Now then, they were rough general groups, categories of when to use it. There's also another way of looking at it. Some people call it Pandor, so preferences, advice, needs, desires, and orders. So what I've done here is I've just put a list, I've just found it online, a list of verbs that precede the subjunctive. So whenever you use any of these, you would follow it with the subjunctive. So this is the one group. Oh, just a little aside, in case you didn't know what the ne expletive was. Basically, it doesn't change the meaning of the sentence. What it says is it draws attention to what precedes it. So it's formal and optional. So you don't have to use it. It makes your French more formal. But yeah, so it's basically the ne. You put the ne, but without the pas. So I've got some examples here. Évitez qu'il ne vous voie, avoid letting him see you. So you can see that there's no pas. So it's not it's not the negative form. Avant que vous ne preniez une décision, before you make a decision, there's no pas again. And j'ai moins de travail que vous n'en avez. I have less work than you do. So with the verbs with the asterisks there, empêcher que, éviter que, then you would use ne for the verb, but it doesn't make it negative. Judgments, emotions, feelings. We have a list here. Again, you can just look, or you could pause the recording and take out any of these that you think that you use regularly or you may use. You could make a list of them and remember that they would be followed by the subjunctive. Another group, possibilities, opinions, doubts, and suppositions, pods. And again, I've color-coded them. There's 1 asterisk, 2, and 3 for these verbs. So there they are there. There's 1, there's the 2, and there's the 3 with a little extra explanation there. So again, you can pause the recording and have a little look through those lists of verbs. So that was all about when to use it. Now, we're going to look more closely at how to use it. So, comment former le subjonctif? Good news is, for regular verbs, it's really, really simple. So you take the il form of the present tense of the verb, you drop the ent ending to form the stem, and then you add these subjunctive endings. So for je, it would be I, for tu, is, for il, elle, on, I, for nous, ions, vous, iez, and il or elle would be ent. So looking at that, I'm sure you can see that it's very, very similar to the normal present tense conjugations. The only differences are the I there for ion and the I there for ie. Otherwise, they're the same as the present tense, normal present tense endings, the regular present tense endings. So there's an example here. Il devient, they become. You cross off the ENT, so you're left with the devient, that's the stem, and then you add the endings here. So, for example, for je, the ending is just the normal e. So, je devienne would be the subjunctive first person singular conjugation of devenir. Another example. So, this basically says the same thing, that le premier group, the first group of regular French verbs, so that's verbs ending in er, in the infinitive, except for aller. You would just basically, it looks very, very much the same, apart from the I there and the I there. So we have que je parle, que tu parles, qu'il, elle parle, ou on, que nous parlions. So it's just an I difference. Que vous parliez, there's an I difference. And qu'il, elle parle is exactly the same again. So hopefully that puts your mind at rest that for most regular verbs, so le premier group, the regular verbs in French, very, very similar to the indicative. You just add the I there and the I there. So hopefully that puts your mind at rest. It's easier than many people think. This is just a table of some verbs that you may use. So we have aimer, finir, vendre, partir, couvrir, mettre, and it just shows you the subjunctive endings, and then it puts them here. So that I suppose the difficult part is getting the stem. Once you've got the stem, the endings are easier. So finir, for example, is an irregular one, but the endings are the same as the regular verbs. Okay. So obviously, again, you can pause the recording at any time, and you could write down any of the verbs that you feel that you would use. Maybe couvrir, you wouldn't use so much, so you don't have to put that one, but some of the verbs you may use more often, particularly aimer, for example. Le deuxième groupe is made up of the verbs ending in aya that end in is with il in the present. So finir, we've seen, is one of those verbs. Réunir, grandir are others. So here's grandir, because we've already seen finir. I've found grandir here. So je grandisse, que tu grandisses, qu'il, elle grandisse, que nous grandissions, que vous grandissiez, and qu'il ou qu'elle grandisse. So as you can see there again, obviously the stem is irregular, but the endings are the same. You've just got those I's there that make it different from the indicative. Okay. However, most verbs ending in IR are actually from the third group of irregulars. So the most common regular verbs you should learn first, in my opinion, are être and avoir. So this is the subjunctive present conjugation of être. So we have que je sois, que tu sois, qu'elle soit, or il, qu'il soit, qu'on soit, que nous soyons, que vous soyez, and qu'elle soit. So we can see that the I changes to the Y for the nous and the vous form. Definitely you need to learn the être and the avoir verbs. So avoir in the subjunctive present would be que j'aille, que tu ailles, qu'elle aille, que nous ayons, que vous ayez, qu'elle aille. And again, you can see, similar to être, that the I changes to the Y for the nous and the vous forms of the present subjunctive. So definitely learn these and then try to use them as much as possible in your writing, just to practice. Because at first it just seems a little bit odd, but the more you use them, it just becomes more normal and easier for you to use. Other verbs that will be useful for you, aller. I mean, aller is a really, really common verb that we use quite a lot. So the subjunctive would be que j'aille, que tu ailles, qu'elle aille, que nous allions, pardon, que vous alliez, and qu'elle aille. So definitely learn those ones as well. Venir, again, we use quite a lot. Je viens, tu viens, viens, venions, and venir and viennent. Then I've also put here savoir and vouloir, again, quite common verbs that are irregular. You may have heard of some of these, je sache. Maybe you've heard il faut que je sache or something like that. Tu saches, elle sache, nous sachions, vous sachiez, elle sache. And then vouloir, que je veuille, veuille, voulions, vouliez, and veuille. So these ones are more regular. The nous and the vous forms look more regular, like the indicative. And the last one on this slide is faire, the two, faire and pouvoir. So we've seen already in one of the examples, je fasse or tu fasses, fassions, fassiez, fasse, and then pouvoir, puisse, 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 puissions, puissiez, and puisse. Okay, so again, verbs that if I were you, I would definitely make a note of these, and like I said, try to use them in your essays or in your oral exam, just to show that you can use them. Just gives you the edge. More irregular verbs. Oh, I'm sorry, this should be flying in. I'm sorry, it's covering some of the writing here. Some more irregular verbs. We have faire, pouvoir, savoir, aller, valoir, vouloir. We've seen some of these already, but they're just in a table form here. It depends how you like to see things. So you can just have a little look at this. And then I've just put a little aside. As an impersonal verb, falloir, like il faut, has only one subjunctive conjugation, qu'il faille. So that's nice and easy because you just have to learn the one form for falloir. Some stem changing verbs then. So lever, for the il form, there's an accent. So that accent is there down as far as, for je, tu, il, elle, on, and il, elle in the plural form, but it is not there for nous and vous. It disappears there, okay? Then verbs like jeter, with one T in the infinitive. For il, the plural, there's a double T. And again, that's the case for the je, tu, il, elle, on, il, and elle, but not for the nous and the vous, where it goes back to the one T. And groups of verbs like essayer, with the Y, in the third person plural form in the present tense, it would be il essaye. But then for the nous and the vous form, it goes to the Y, I, so the Y-I for both of them. Okay, that's just a stem for stem changing verbs. Then some other irregular ones, we have devoir and prendre. So you can see that again, they have two stems. They have the stem for je, tu, il, elle, on, il, and elle, and then a different one for nous and vous there. French can be tricky at times. Okay, so thinking of all that together now, we're going to give it a little go and see if you can put the conjugation of the verb in brackets. So we have partir, travailler, écrire, sortir, choisir, lire, regarder, and vendre into the subjunctive. So it says, lisez et complétez les phrases suivantes avec le subjonctif présent. So number one, je veux que nous, and then we have partir en vacances. So what you could do now is maybe pause the recording, give them all a go, and then see if you were correct and mark yourself afterwards. Okay, so the answer for number one, je veux que nous partions. So it's very, very regular, similar to the present tense, but because it's the nous form, we've added the I there. Number two, il souhaite que vous, and then we have the verb travailler, beaucoup en classe. So it's a regular ER verb. So for vous, the only difference would be that you add the I there. So travailler, travailler. Okay, beaucoup en classe. Number three, elle voudrait que tu, and then we have the verb écrire au prof. So the conjugation of écrire for the second person singular would be écrit. So we're just same as the present tense of the indicative. Nous désirons qu'il sortir moins souvent. So the third person plural, il, of sortir in the subjunctive, sorte. Vous aimeriez que je, and then we have choisir un bon film ce soir. So je plus choisir is just choisir. Je souhaiterais que nous, and we have lire le journal ensemble. So the nous form, remember, it's slightly different. So we have lisions. And then elle désire que je regarde is the verb, la série Bob l'éponge. So that would be just regarde, same as the indicative. And then number 8, il aimerait que je, and then vendre is the verb, ma voiture. So, ils aimeraient que je vende ma voiture. Okay? Oh, just quickly looking at le subjonctif passé. So, pour conjuguer au subjonctif passé, on conjugue l'auxiliaire au subjonctif présent. On ajoute l'auxiliaire. Exemple, qu'il soit parti. So I'm going to show you. Basically, you just need to learn the present subjunctive of avoir and être for the auxiliary verbs. And then you just add the normal participe passé. So examples, nous sommes contents que vous soyez venus. So the only difference is, instead of vous êtes venu, it becomes vous soyez venu. And elle est désolée que tu n'aies pas pu venir. So the only difference is I instead of a. Okay, so we've just changed the auxiliary verb into the subjunctive. C'est dommage qu'il soit tombé malade. So the soit is the difference there. So as long as you've learned avoir and être in the present subjunctive, the past subjunctive is really, really simple. So I'm hoping that that's put your mind at rest to show you that the subjunctive tense in French really isn't that bad. It's just a matter of learning some patterns, remembering which verbs precede the subjunctive, and then trying to use some examples in your speaking and written work and being able to recognize it in the reading and the listening. So, comment réussir? So I would suggest learn some of the set phrases where the subjunctive is required. Try to include a couple of examples in the written or speaking exams to show the examiner that you know it and you can do it. Learn some set phrases that include the subjunctive, you know, the full phrase, for example, il faut que j'aille, so that you've just got a few phrases that you can just use quite easily. Learn the most common verbs such as avoir, être, aller, faire in the subjunctive, and learn how to recognize the subjunctive so that it doesn't scare you in the reading or listening exams. Okay, so that's my advice. Vous avez des questions? We will be doing a live recording session at the beginning of February. So if you do join us and you have any questions, then hopefully we can answer those questions during the live session. So, l'objectif, quand et comment utiliser le subjonctif. Hopefully, we've shown you here now when and how to use the subjunctive in French. So, bonne chance. Hopefully, that's helped you with the subjunctive. And just a little cartoon there as an aside. And just to remind you that obviously there will be 4 sessions recording, as I said in the introduction slides. So if any of those sound appealing to you, please join us and have a little look at those recordings and join us for the live session. Okay, merci, au revoir.